We are going to waste no time here because we had a little bit of tech issues. So here's hoping this works. The chairman of the African People's Socialist Party, Omali Yeshitela. Omali, can you hear us?
Yes, yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
we hear
beautiful.
you.
We
Wow.
made it.
All right. We have liftoff.
We have
Yes.
liftoff.
Right
Thank you
on.
so much for joining us. Pleasure to meet you. Appreciate you being here so much. And yeah, sorry for any technical snafus that we had, and sorry to the audience. We're a couple minutes late, but thank you so much for joining today. It's a real honor to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's good to be with you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, folks, we're just going to jump right into this. No small talk today. So, Omali, would you give us just a brief introduction to yourself and the Uhuru movement? These were some of the press materials you sent us. This is you back in the 1960s, and then here you are throughout the years. Could you just give us a brief overview for those who might not be familiar with Uhuru or the African People's Socialist Party?
Well, I want to thank you very much, first of all, for having us, because it's been difficult trying to break out of this information encirclement that we've encountered through the regular corporate, state-sponsored, supported media. So I want to thank you very much. My name, as you said, is Omali Yeshitela. I'll be 83 years old in October of this year. And for most of my life, I've been involved in the struggle for Black freedom. And I was a member of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, that in 1966 put forth a public demand slogan of Black Power, which had determined that the struggle that we were involved in had gone beyond the simple concept of trying to integrate into the system, but recognize that as a people, we have to have power of our own lives. We wanted to escape from the clutches of the Democratic Party that had so many times double-crossed us. Well, the entire system had so many times double-crossed us, and we wanted to fight for self-determination. So I was a part of that movement. And most of my life, I've been a part of that movement. And so in 1966, the Black Power struggle happened. SNCC happened in the last part of 1966. I went to prison. I was jailed in December 29, 1966 for snatching a mural off the wall of the City Hall of St. Petersburg that had been there for a few decades, that represent a caricature of Black people with extended limbs and huge pink lips over most of our face and over the faces. And it was supposed to be representative of Black people. We had asked the mayor to take it down, asked the city council to take it down. Black people had been asked them to do that for years, and they had refused to do it. So on December 29, 1966, SNCC led a group of demonstrators to the city hall. Actually, what we were struggling around was the city of St. Petersburg had was receiving something like $50 million in federal funds. And they were going to use that money to beautify, to plant flowers in downtown St. Petersburg. And we were saying that money needs to be, certainly a huge sector of it, for economic development for our communities. The time when there were no real streets and the Black community was sand and what have you. This is Florida we're talking about, so sand, just horrible circumstances. And we were restricted to a 2-mile radius of where we could live by law in that city. So the mayor told us that we should really learn how not to be so sensitive, and that we knew he was not a racist and he was a nice guy. And we were setting our struggle back by asking them to remove the mural. Anyway, the mural was torn down. I was charged with something like 11 offenses for tearing that mural down, me and 5 other members of SNCC. And then I was, most of the charges were misdemeanors, and they charged me also with a felony, grand larceny, and sentenced me to 5 years in prison for that. So I was in and out of prison for about 2.5 years based on that. And this is a high tide of struggle of African people at this time in this country. And the system was frightened by this thing they had seen with new young Black people who were no longer just willing to Wait Forever for Freedom, etc., and who were engaged in direct action. That was one of the things SNCC was characterized for. And so, as I said, I was out on bond after a while on appeal bond. And then I was out for 4 days and had been asked to come into Gainesville, Florida, which was 150 miles or so north of St. Petersburg, to participate in demonstrations because some young Black people had been locked up there, and they wanted me to participate because I had achieved a certain element of renown. And when I got off the Greyhound bus in Gainesville, Florida, I learned that Martin Luther King had been killed. He was killed on the way there. So the whole nature of the demonstration that we were going to attend changed. And so I'm out now for 4 days. 4 days later, the demonstration happens. I get the first person arrested in the state of Florida for inciting to riot. And the incitement to riot statute did not require a riot to happen. I just had to want a riot to occur. So they locked me up for inciting to riot. Again, a speech offense is what they locked me up for. And I was locked up for half a month rather, on that charge. They came off the bond at the same time for the other charge that I was for that had imprisoned me. And so I was locked up for another half month before they could secure bond to get me out. I get out, and then the sanitation workers in St. Petersburg, Florida, go on strike. So the Attorney General of the state of Florida goes to my bondman and have them come off my bond so that I couldn't get back to St. Petersburg, where the Black sanitation workers go on strike. And so I was locked up for another half month. I finally made bond and had to escape Gainesville and on the floorboards of the backseat of a car, and then engaged in the whole sanitation workers movement. And stemming from that, there was an organization that we created called JOMO, and from that we created in 1972 the African People's Socialist Party. So that's sort of the trajectory that we were on.
Okay, yeah. So you're a really fascinating figure of almost living history. You describe having been at the Berlin Wall when you were in the service, all the way through all of these eras and evolution of radical movements. You've lived through this across decades. We have so few elders who have really lived this, who didn't wind up becoming yuppies in the suburbs, or very often becoming so impoverished that they've died. Very often we think your generation is conservative, but it's actually that the conservatives lived. Yes. And a lot of the more radical elements died.
Yes.
And so we had a moment, this George Floyd moment, where there's more focus on Black life in America than there's probably been for decades. And you had a group like yours that has survived for 60 years, that has actually done work successfully in the Black community across decades, completely invisible. And what gets elevated is this Black Lives Matter movement, where they're getting millions of dollars, where they used to buy mansions, predictably. Why didn't a group like yours that got money from the FDA to open a successful farmers market, why didn't you get some of that money from Apple? Why didn't they talk to you about the Black struggle in America?
Well, I should tell you that I was in Ferguson when Zuckerberg connected with the Black Lives Matter slogan and helped to promote it and extend it. And when Soros and a whole bunch of other people brought all kinds of money, it's mind-boggling the amount of resources they brought into Ferguson.
I thought you were going to say, actually, I do have a deal with Apple. I thought they were going to say that.
Yeah, and their objective was to redefine what this struggle was all about. It never was some kind of ambiguous concept of Black Lives Matter. I mean, the moment that got people killed and jailed in this country, we weren't just walking around saying Black Lives Matter. Who are you saying that to? And what's the basis of saying that? We were talking about Black people have to have power of our own lives. and just Black Lives Matter. I mean, it was the most embarrassing thing you could see when you had Joe Biden, the guy who is responsible for the 1964 so-called crimes bill that and used William Jefferson Clinton to put 100,000 cops in the streets of this country with the recognition that this was designed for Black people. That was part of what was understood. And now Biden's party, Biden is Representative of Freedom. Biden, who in the 1960s was opposed to the Civil Rights Bill. Biden, who said he was against busing because he didn't want his children to go to school in a jungle. So now he's able to say Black Lives Matter because it doesn't mean anything. Right. And it's an easy slogan, Black Lives Matter. So what's the debate around that, whether Black Lives Matter? And as you know, some people jumped on it and say, well, all lives matter, white lives, blue lives matter, all lives matter. So that's not the question. And so it was easy for that to happen. But what they assassinated Malcolm for, and they killed Martin Luther King for, and there was concrete, suggestions about Black people having control of our lives and actually transforming our relationship to the system. Black Lives Matter didn't do that. And it became an extension of the Democratic Party, like so many other organizations in the Black community are extensions of the Democratic Party. And that's not who we are, and that's not who we ever were. And we had to fight. I remember Fannie Lou Hamer, 1964, when in 1964, the Freedom Summer that we were involved in Mississippi, just to get Black people into the Democratic National Convention. So we had Freedom Summer. We got the liberals promised they were going to seat us instead of the Mississippi lynch mob. They called itself the Democratic Party there. And we got there, and Johnson and Humphreys and others double-crossed us and said what they would do is give us 2 non-voting seats. And Fannie Lou Hamer made the famous statement that we didn't come this far for no 2 seats when everybody's tired. And so at that juncture, we walked out of that convention, went to Lowndes County, Alabama, and created the Lowndes County Freedom Organization that came to be known as the Black Panther Party. But the thing that's really interesting is because Fannie Lou Hamer, she mentioned how in 1964, she had fought to get into the Democratic Convention. In 1968, if you remember, that was Chicago. That was when the Chicago massacre happened, people beating all out in the streets and whatever. She said in 1968, I fought to get out of it. And so that's the kind of relationship we've had historically with the Democratic Party. And now we're in a situation because they have eradicated any meaningful movement in the Black community. The Democratic Party doesn't have to offer the Black community anything. And you can't even say that it lied to us because it never promised us anything. Only thing it does is say that you should be frightened of the Republicans, you should be frightened of Trump, and therefore you should vote for Biden. That's not good enough. And that's why they have to silence people like me and our organization, because we're still on the same quest that Black people have been on since forever being brought into this situation.
So I want to ask you something here on the economics question, because this struck me when you appeared on the Tucker Carlson show. You talked about this a little bit. This is from the press packet that you sent us in preparation for this interview. We are our own liberators. We can't be bought. The African People's Socialist Party has maintained economic self-sufficiency throughout its existence, ensuring that its political agenda serves the interest of its self-defined program for African liberation and is not dictated by any external force. Okay, so that goes on. But in the interview with Tucker that I saw you on, you spoke about economic empowerment and economic self-determination. And I noticed a very stark contrast between, your vision of a people's economic movement, socialism, and the sort of liberal nanny state that you seem to speak against in that interview. I feel like socialism as defined under neoliberalism can only take the form of a welfare state, which you argue, as I understood it in that interview, to be disempowering. Whereas you and your organization advocate for self-sufficiency, self-determination. So can you speak a little bit as to how you and your organization have put that in action over the years. Here's another photo that you guys sent us, the Uhuru Bakery and Cafe. I assume this is either from your bookstore or your graphic design shop. I know you guys had both
This was
of
our
those.
bakery. This was our bakery.
Oh, this was the bakery. Okay, that was in the
there
bakery. Okay.
Oakland, Uhuru Bakery Cafe in Oakland, California.
Got
And
it. And here's the newspaper, the
this was
Burning Spear. Yep.
photo typesetting outfit. This was in San Francisco. So we established these economic entities with the objective is to get resources that we can use to develop economic projects. And that bakery that you showed, it was there for about 3 or 4 years until the U.S. invasion of Panama. And with the U.S. invasion of Panama, we organized from that space. We organized a protest in Oakland. I think it was at a Marine recruiting station. And we marched from there and went to the Marine recruiting station. And that night, the bakery caught fire. But it wasn't too bad. We said it'll be okay because we can repair this in a week or so. And then later that night, it caught fire again. This is after the fire department had come put the thing out. So this is a real serious issue, economic self-reliance, because the state and sectors of the rulers in this country would prefer for African people to be in a state of welfare slavery forever, that we can't take care of ourselves. There's a whole industry. Mobs of people are attached to these programs that's supposedly serving Black people. You can get welfare if there's no man in the house. You can get these kinds of resources, destroying our families and supposedly doing us a favor by doing this, and they keep us locked into it. So we've got all kinds of liberals, all sectors of the Democratic Party, et cetera, many of them are connected to these programs that keep African people in a state of servitude because to become self-determining or self-reliant goes against their interests and certainly goes against the interests of Black people as well. So that's part of what it is that we're fighting against. And that's part of what it is that they would attack us. I mean, we have something like 52 economic entities that we've created over the years in North St. Louis. This is an invitation. I want to make it to you and to all of your listeners. Come to North St. Louis because you have to see it. If you see it, then you understand why we are under assault here. We've transformed North St. Louis. You see desolate areas. You've seen pictures they like to show of Ukraine bombed out. Well, that's what North St. Louis looks like, generally speaking, without a single bomb having been dropped here. And we have organized and pulled people into a process that we've torn down buildings that were in states of disrepair. They couldn't be fixed, and we've rebuilt them. We brought businesses to this community, et cetera, so that people can live and can have agency. And that's what the whole thing is, for African people to exert our own agency. And that's why this notion that somehow the Russians, we work for the Russians. This is the most ridiculous thing. It should be ridiculous, but I think that because of how they have crippled African people and the whole struggle for self-determination, many people probably do believe that Africans do not have the wherewithal to take care of ourselves, and therefore there must be somebody, especially somebody white, that's telling us what to do all the time. In this case, the Russians, of course, they've used the Russian thing for a long time against us. Yeah.
See, now the very fact that your group exists and is so invisibilized demonstrates to me the Powell memo succeeded, right? Now, for anyone who doesn't know, this was a very famous memo written by a former Supreme Court justice advocating for corporations to basically take over the media. And as a result of that, they run this very elaborate kind of controlled opposition narrative, so that the ideas that you're presenting are coded as Black conservative ideas. And those are the only people who are allowed to express them. But their solution is very different. It's Herman Cain. You start Godfather Pizza. It's not anything to do with the community, and certainly not anything to do with leftism. If you look at the overall narrative about these 60s and 70s radical movements, it's that they failed, they collapsed under the weight of their own contradictions, they were violent, they were subject to being run by charismatic narcissists, they were dangerous. You see these movies where they represent those groups. That's always the story, right? Some naive protagonist winds up finding out they're going to blow up all these people and it's really not what they thought it was. And yet here's a group like yours that's been chugging along for all these years, actually doing what these black conservatives say. And as a result of the fact that voices like yours are suppressed, and the only people that you hear saying welfare is actually bad for the community are right wingers. As a result, as soon as people on the left hear you speak out against welfare, as I have, because I was raised on it,
Right.
and I know personally
Right.
that a lot of the problems that people describe with it, I lived it. It's real, man. It's not good for you not to see anybody go to work.
Right.
How you going to grow up to take care of yourself? It makes
Well,
it
Omali, you just
much
mentioned
harder.
they don't let you have a man in the house. Russell has said the same thing
Yeah.
about his
Yeah,
life.
yeah. My mother didn't get remarried after she got divorced because she was afraid they were going to take away the welfare.
Yeah, the state becomes the husband.
Right.
You know.
So
and, yeah.
No. So I really want to hear your thoughts about that. Left people reflexively, as soon as you attack welfare, they think you're a right winger.
Yes.
So why don't they allow people who represent the left to talk about this?
Well, one of the biggest contradictions we have with what's traditionally characterized as the left in this country, and this is not new. We've had to fight them in the 1960s as well, because the whole notion of African people being self-determining. In fact, the leftists were more effective in arguing against us because they brought what was characterized as science to the discussion, where you had others who were rabble-rousing and who were obviously, like right-wingers and clanners and this kind of thing. But here are the leftists. These are the white people who love us, right? And so they come with a much more sophisticated argument against African people being self-reliant. And somehow for us to be self-reliant is to be splitting the working class, the multinational working class. We're causing a split with the working class because we're talking about African people being self-governing, self-reliant, being able to take care of ourselves in the struggle against what we characterize as colonial domination. And what's really overlooked is, and people, involved in such a subjective kind of politics. This is what they've dumbed the people down so that you don't recognize objective kinds of contradictions. We say black power, and somebody say, well, what about the white people? We didn't say anything about white people. They just want to be in control of our own lives. It's not a statement, against white people. It's black people having to have our own existence, being capable of ourselves. And once you say black power, then they say, well, you are like apartheid. You're for apartheid. You're for segregation. I'm not for segregation. I'm for self-determination, because the ones who put us in a situation of segregation or integration is the one who's in control. People have to have the ability to make their own determinations about what their future is going to look like. I'm not a segregationist. I'm a liberationist. I'm for us being able to make choices about the fact that our children will have a life, not because a good white man or a good Negro says that they can have a decent life, because the power to make that happen is in the hands of black people ourselves. That's what it's all about. And that's the thing that cannot be tolerated.
Yeah, no, I think that's extremely well said. And like I said earlier, I think the reason why a lot of this talk about welfare, slavery, and the welfare state gets categorized as right wing is because I think under capitalism, it's really impossible to empower workers, right? Like that's impossible under capitalism. So any left that exists under capitalism takes the form of this sort of nanny state liberalism, right? Because that's the only left that is doable under this system. You have to overthrow capitalism before you get to true worker empowerment on a sort of broad basis. Do you have any?
Well, and you could argue that that's why all of these projects fail, because they don't want to fund projects that succeed,
right,
such as yours.
But the thing is that ours is a working class movement.
Right.
We're a black working class movement. And many of those who characterize themselves as left in the African community, so-called progressive, they are not. They're opposed to that. They can't even perceive of the black workers having power over our own lives and power over them. So there's a certain kind of arrogance that's associated with their presumption of who they are. And they have this marriage with the system. They protect the system as it is, and they protect themselves within the system by being obviously opposed to what it is that we stand for and what we try to promote. And we do it concretely. And that's why I'm asking people, don't just take our word for it. We say it's not what we say, it's what we do. And you can actually see transformation, places where we go, where we work, etc., where there's nothing in the African community, we put it there. And we brought the people into political life and economic activity. We've now the St. Louis, the North St. Louis, where we are, was completely desolate. And the whole corridor, we've transformed it. People are now moving back to the community. People are repairing their own businesses and things like that as a consequence of the activity we're involved in. And people are celebrating us. These are people, not the politicians. Not the politician. There was a politician, a black politician, an office holder here, who's in prison right now, by the way, but who actually called for sending the National Guard into this place that we are developing, because they said the crime is so bad among black people, sending the National Guard. This was a black man who was an office holder. And so what we did, we changed the conditions on the ground. And the things that he was describing as a problem, they don't exist like that anymore, precisely because of development, that people have the ability to see a future, which is something that was difficult, if not impossible, before. So that's who we are. And we believe that we can change the material reality and bring people into the process of changing their reality. And in the process of changing the reality, the people themselves become changed. And this is what it is that we believe and how we function for the last 50 or more years. And this is the thing that makes us a problem. And if we could have been on the bandwagon. I mean, we were here when the Black Lives slogan materialized. We were here. We saw more black sellouts per square inch located in Ferguson after the Mike Brown killing in 2014 than you could find any place in the world. They brought them here. They parachuted them in. And all kinds of money was made available for them, et cetera. And we did it just by organizing the people on the ground to get involved in changing our own lives, our own circumstances, and having the power in our own hands. You can't tell me anything, any institution, any economic institution by any of the so-called moderate or respectable Negro organization, including Black Lives Matter. And Black Lives Matter doesn't matter enough for the Black Lives Matter movement to be saying hands off the Uhuru 3, that this notion that we're working for the Russians is ridiculous. They haven't stepped forward. The progressive black politicians haven't stepped forward, even here in St. Louis, where they live and we lived, et cetera, not a single word. And there are a number of reasons for that, but that hasn't occurred at all. But
that's true. I haven't heard, Corey Bush, progressive squad member. I haven't heard her say anything about you guys.
Cornel West.
Not a word. Well, Cornel West did say something. I saw him on some kind of interview that he did say something, but nothing from Corey Bush. We actually almost camped out at her office trying to get her to say something. It hasn't happened. Yeah.
Right, well, sorry, go ahead, Russell.
Do you think that the timing of this crackdown on your group, you've been around for decades, do you think it's because of the Black Lives Matter movement? Do you think they want to make sure at this moment, when there's all of this focus on these issues, that there is no effective class-based group with a global perspective represented in the conversation? Do you think that's why
true.
Now?
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think also the international stuff that's happening, Ukraine and what have you, because I saw something not too long ago, I think it was in Foreign Affairs, or they were talking about a weakness in U.S. war making is that the majority of African people are not united with the wars that they're making in various places. And we came out solidly against the U.S. position on this war. It didn't just start. It didn't start even in 2014. The war against Russia has been made for more than 100 years. I mean, the U.S. was among all the colonizers who invaded the Soviet Union in 1918, shortly after the Russian Revolution, which itself was, So I think, yes, I do think that they want to make sure that the ones who are speaking speak their language and carry their message, generally speaking, and represents Black people in a way that's friendly to the Democratic Party, friendly to the stability of the social system itself, and friendly to these adventures that they're making, killing. A lot of people are dying. They attacked us because they said that the Russians paid us. They said the Russians paid us to be against the U.S. adventure, and they're talking about possible nuclear conflagration, and they would put me in prison for 15 years because they don't want a discussion about that. And most of the things that's plaguing this world, and the whole social system is in a state of severe crisis right now. It's very clear for anybody to see. The hegemony of the United States is something that's being challenged in a mighty way. It's been challenged by Russia, China. It's been challenged by people in Venezuela and Afghanistan. I mean, all around the world, people are rising up, and there's this crisis is something that's now is something that you see the U.S. Government in the form of the president, et cetera, trying to deal with it, and how this sector of the rulers are going to be able to maintain hegemony. That's that, and Biden is their guy right now. And Biden is, wow, I mean, what a situation to be in for anybody. So Biden is their guy, and he's trying not to be Sleepy Joe, and he's got to exert strength and power, etc. It's a hell of a place for anybody to be in. I would hate to be somebody who had to rely on Biden or Trump, for that matter, for my leadership and my security. And so they're knocking everything they can. Even the election thing is the state being used here as a part of the elections. There's no doubt about that. I mean, and the young people rising up. This is magnificent. On these college campuses, young people being brought into political life in a way that we haven't seen since the 1960s. This is a whole new generation of people who are rising up to oppose the system. They just need leadership, and they're trying to make sure they don't get it by attacking, forces like myself and our organization.
Well, I want to get into this a little more here. You sent in your press kit, you have here FBI attacks on Black community programs. The FBI is attacking the ability of the Black community to feed, clothe, house, educate, and protect our community. You also go through FBI attacks on Black participation in the electoral space, and then you have FBI's war on African liberation, culminating in your case in the raid in July of 2022. So in the what time we have left, I understand you have another call in about 10, 15 minutes, but do you want to just run down the history of what you're talking about there, about this sort of criminalization of not only Black radicalism, but really, as you guys explain it, Black community building, period? And then, explain how that relates to your case and the urgency of this moment. You're going to trial this year, as I understand, correct?
Yes, in September. Right now, we're scheduled for trial on September 3rd in Tampa, Florida. And people who want to keep up with that can go to Hands Off Uhuru. That's UHURU.org. And among the things that's happening that makes a mockery of this whole notion that they're fighting against us because we are Russian hirelings is the attack that they've made on our economic institutions. The banks have begun to sanction us like a foreign country or something like that, hostile country. Banks that we've had more than 20 years of relationship with. We've never missed or been late with payments or anything like that, and sometimes paid them off early. They've notified us in one instance that we had 2 weeks to make an $80,000 payment on a mortgage. They've actually some individuals who had accounts with it. This is Regions Bank. They took the accounts down. People couldn't use that. The church right across the street from my house that was raided by the FBI on July 29, 2022, right across the street. We had it under contract that we were going to put community programs there. The church mysteriously caught a fire, burned down. I mean, these are some of the attacks, and other banks have done similar things to us. One of these, I've forgotten what it's called now. It's one of these internet programs that you can use to raise money with. and we had done this to raise money, GoFundMe, I think it was,
Mm-hmm.
for the defense. And they held, I think, something like $9,000 for months and refused to turn it over to us until we got a lawyer involved in it. So they made all of these assaults on us and using every entity that's possible, including armed forces. And when I say armed forces, I mean the attack that they made on my home, that I thought they were going to kill me and possibly my wife, the attacks that they made on my offices in St. Petersburg, Florida, and in St. Louis. They were very violent attacks, and we weren't charged with anything. Even after they did that, they handcuffed us and held us sometimes for hours while they searched our institutions and homes, and we weren't charged with anything. So we were characterized as unindicted co-conspirators, which with the in Russia. They said the guys in Russia, and there's going to be an indictment later in the day, and this is going to be big news. This is what the FBI agent wanted me to know. This is going to be big news, so they said that my name popped up in this indictment against a Russian, and if he comes to the United States, they're going to lock him up. And so anyway, we're handcuffed, zip tied, and what have you. It was an experience. And these are armed forces. These are not these. They are really. They used these laser targeting devices that you see on weapons. And most time people see it in a movie with these dots. That in my chest when I came downstairs at their command, 5 o'clock in the morning, pre-dawn. All over my chest, these dots. I thought they were going to kill me, like they killed Fred Hampton in 1969. And I was concerned about my wife. She opens the door finally to come out. We tried to call, let people know we were under attack, and she couldn't because the phones had been jammed. I mean, this is a hell of a, like operation that they've initiated against us. And we're in the most impoverished sector of St. Louis. This is an impoverished sector of St. Louis. They've taken over the porch next door. They put tape on the doorbell video so that nobody can see what it is that they're doing. They're occupying the space. They've cordoned off the space so that the whole community, the whole neighborhood is now blocked off and people can't move freely. This was the kind of assault that they made against us, and it's bogus. It's bogus on its face. It's bogus, and I'm glad you were able to show some of the pictures that you showed going way back, because they want to say, and they want to be able to put me on trial without allowing us to show that everything they charged us with doing, we've been doing for 50 years. And so they want to just start history with the Russians, et cetera. This is stuff we've been always doing, and I'm glad you were able to show that. And so anyway, that's the kind of thing that we're having to contend with. And we expect to be victorious. We're going to trial, as I said, on September 3rd. That's how it's scheduled now. We have two really important motions that we've put. We've asked the court to get rid of the indictment, to dismiss the charges against us, and the magistrate for that region, that district in federal district in Florida, I think it's the 2nd district in Florida, has disagreed with us and said that it doesn't matter, because we said we can bring experts who will unite with the position that we have on Ukraine. Another thing they said doesn't matter. It says disinformation anyway. It's not disinformation because it's a lie. They said even if it's true, if it's something that works against the United States, and then it's working for the Russians. So this is the kind of stuff we have, and this is why it's so dangerous to everybody else, because they can say, if you have a position that's the same position that some other force has in the world, that the United States has declared to be an enemy at the moment, then they can charge you with working for that entity, which is what they've done with us. They said that over a 6-year period, we collected something like $7,000 from the Russians. This is just remarkable. We raised something like $250,000 for this trial alone, to get ready for this trial. We raised more. We raised like $10,000 in 2 hours a couple of weeks ago just to raise money for this trial. And they're saying that somehow over a 7-year period, we took $6,000 from the Russians, and that's part of the evidence they have that we work for the Russians, which is ridiculous, of course. Anyway,
Wow.
yeah.
Can I ask you something that you're
Sure.
uniquely qualified to answer? Very few people could answer this, because very few people have been in this struggle for as long as you have. Now, you had, as you point out, the tragic murder of Fred Hampton. You had the FBI doing black bag jobs back in the day, right? And today you've got what you're describing. You've got this debanking going on. You've got a raft of post 9/11 laws that we didn't have before that make it much easier to legally suppress speech. Would you say speech has gotten more free or less free over the course of your time in the struggle?
It's less free. It's less free because the crisis of this system is greater than I've ever seen it in the past. It's less free, but I also believe that that in many ways we're much better off today than we were in the 1960s, because even as bad things were happening to us, in some instances we had some idea who was responsible for it. It's never been so flagrant, and that people know about. Don't need a church committee to do it. They tell us who they are when they come at 5 o'clock in the morning and disrupt the entire community. And the thing that may trouble me a bit is that the tendency that the state uses when it wants to take away democratic rights, constitutional rights, is they'll pick someone or some entity that they assume is going to be unpopular, not popular enough in the public arena that they can get away with doing it. They're picking an issue like Russia. They've done so much work over the years. They're supposed to be scared of Russia. And black people, especially black militants, this is supposed to be the boogeyman. And even the thing they've done with Trump, I'm concerned because some of this stuff is free speech stuff. And I'm no Trump fan or anything like that. But if they can get people who hate Trump to unite with attacking democratic rights, free speech and stuff like that, they've assaulted free speech, not Trump. And that means everybody's free speech is under assault and not just Trump. And that's what I'm really hoping that white people can see through this thing, because when the First Amendment was passed in 1791, that was not for black people. We were still living under slavery in 1865 before that was over. So the First Amendment was not for us. And so now, because we forced our way into the public arena in a fashion that makes it difficult for them to say that the First Amendment is not for black people, like they did in 1857 with the Dred Scott decision, said that a black person has no right that a white person has to respect. They can't say that anymore. They say that was the worst law that ever come from the Supreme Court on the one hand, but on the other hand, they make it clear that that's still the case. And so they can't say that so clearly anymore. And the thing is that the white people really have to, and I believe that's a different situation. There's 117 cities that people who are part of the solidarity movement, white people, are working with this movement. And going into September 3rd, I think we still have enough room as a consequence of this kind of discussion we're having now and people being aware of it, that we can help the court to recognize that the people know that it's an assault upon the people, and hopefully the court will rule according to law on some of these motions that we filed to get these charges dismissed before September 3rd.
All right. Well, there are dozens more questions we have for you, but we are up against 3 o'clock. I know you have another call. I would love to talk to you again sooner than later.
Absolutely.
Truly a pleasure and an honor to have you this afternoon, and stay in touch. We'll get the word out about September 3rd, and we'd love to have you on definitely between now and then for sure.
Thank you. Please do. Let's do it again. I thank
All right.
you.
And that's
Appreciate
Hands
it so
Off
much.
It's been a
Uhuru.
great honor.
Handsoffuhuru.org.
Handsoffuhuru.org. Definitely, I want to put the website up here so we have that in the clip, as they say. Omali Yeshitela, Chairman, thank you so much.
Thank
Pleasure.
you.
Thank you.
Please clap.